one week, one lens through which to view your life. So this week is a bit difficult for me because I had a worsening of my cancer situation. I was a rumbling 3C melanoma. I'd been that for 6 years. I'd failed treatment, surgeries, all the rest of it. But nevertheless, I'd had 8 months of, or maybe longer, of clear scans, and things are looking good. Maybe like the last really brutal treatment followed by surgery that I did actually cleared it. But actually, no. So it's gone to my bones and to my liver. And everyth's uncertain from now. So that's going to be the major inspiration for this week's thought, which is first of all about uncertainty. So it's living with the major uncertainty about knowing whether you are actually going to, well, how many days you have left in front of you. Now, I had a friend say, oh, well, actually, you could just, imagine the worst and kind of try and accept the worst. And I was thinking, well, yeah, the worst case scenario is basically dying at age, well, I'm 46 now. So, soon, shall we say, leaving my husband, who's only just turned 40, and my 8.5-year-old son. But I don't think that's the worst that you can get used to. It's intolerable. That's just a worst that is not acceptable. It's not a normal time of life to die. And it should, I think, rightfully involve some degree of rebellion, which is also a motivating factor to be combative about it. I think the only circumstance in which you could kind of come make your peace with the worst case scenario in this situation is if you were depressive. And I have seen some people not manage to deal with that uncertainty and kind of fluctuate between unrealistic optimism, which of course you can never really believe in because no one can really promise you anything. The realistic scenario is absolute uncertainty with probabilities attached, obviously, but in my scenario, the probabilities are not in my favour. Or absolute pessimism, and let it be a foregone conclusion that the worst will happen. But actually, the difference between having no hope and having some hope is huge. And at the moment, I still have some hope, even if it's small. And it doesn't matter how small it is. It's a kind of matter of principle. There is some hope. At some stage later on, if I'm unlucky, then I may have to cross the bridge into the no hope. But let's not even think about that yet. For the moment, it's all uncertain. And I have seen someone kind of in a similar situation to mine go into kind of pessimism, thinking, well, let's prepare for the worst, and then if anything better happens, it'll be good news. But then he spiraled into depression, and I think that is a fairly inevitable consequence of deciding to basically accept your fate, when this is not a fate that is acceptable, that is humanly acceptable. So that was the first point. And the second point is sometimes I've heard people say, oh, in any case, what does it change? Because everyone should live every day as if it were their last. And I have several points to make about this. The first is that it's very different living every day as if it were to be your last, when actually there's only a very small probability that your train will crash, or that you get run over by a car, or that you'll contract some instantly deadly disease. For most people, they can kind of go through life expecting that the days will follow one after the other, for a kind of normal length of time to a death that's at a normal time of life. But when you have a really serious disease and your days might be counted, then of course living every day as though it might be your last puts huge pressure on you, because there is an actual real possibility of maybe not the day being the last, but being one of the last. And so you're living it out of a place of fear, not out of a place of confidence. And you can't live it out of a place of confidence because of what I was starting with, which is about that uncertainty. It would be unreasonably optimistic to have a full confidence. It's not possible. So within that, I'm losing my way here a little bit because it's such recent news. It was last Thursday. I might already have mentioned that, and we're only Wednesday when I'm recording this video. It also made me think about the fact that living every day as though it might be your last doesn't really fit with logotherapy, or if you like, Viktor Frankl's view about having meaning in life, because although one can find meaning in every instant moment, a lot of the meaning in one's life is inscribed in a concept of time. It's about projects that span time. So bringing up one's child, for example, seeing them grow up, seeing them through into adulthood, looking forward to seeing what they're going to turn into. That's just one example, but it could be work or sport or anything. I can't really think. My mind, as I said, this is a fairly spontaneous, but I think you can probably get the picture of the number of things that are actually embedded, whose meaning is given by being embedded in a sense in time. And so when that length of time ahead becomes uncertain, that's very difficult, and it means that reducing it down to a very short horizon, or even worse, the horizon of just one day, basically forces one to turn hedonistic, which is basically just having a sense of, which could actually quite quickly be irresponsibility, and maybe even selfishness. And I don't think that's definitely not what Viktor Frankl had in mind. It's not to say that everything in terms of meaning and projects is time dependent, but a lot of it is, and there is this notion of responsibleness, that the fact that we know that we're going to die has to make us have this sense of responsibility about the choices that we make in our actions, because what is done is, because the time that we have is precious, and it's and we're building something with our life that will one day end, so we can't allow ourselves just to fanning around in the present moment and not build anything. When I say build something, it doesn't necessarily mean something material. It could be building something, as it were, in what I would call in Christian terms the kingdom of God, building relationships with others, building through love, through your everyday presence. And I suppose to that extent, those are things that are anchored in the very present moment, but they are also inscribed in time. So, I think sometimes people confuse this idea of living every day as though it might be your last, and the with a notion of, or just being very present, or just living in the present moment. So what does it matter what the future holds? Well, as I said, it does matter for a start. And I think it's come also from a misguided notion that actually has its roots in being present to the moment, and that is something that is worth working on. And actually it becomes, and ironically, when you know your days are counted, it's even harder to be present in the moment because of that underlying uncertainty and fear. So it's even more something that one needs to work on. But that doesn't mean just being reckless and living hedonistically, and even less selfishly. So I've just thrown around a few ideas here that may help you in whatever you might have been experiencing recently, or it might help if you know other people who are in a similar situation to mine, facing serious illness or other difficult circumstances, and how things look from their angle and what challenges they're facing, or maybe what challenges you are facing if you are the person concerned. So hopefully that's been thought-provoking, and don't hesitate to leave your comments below if you have something to add to this. And as I say, this is very spontaneous, but I think the next ones probably continue in this vein, because I've obviously got quite a lot to be dealing with at the moment. Bye bye.